In the summer of 1972, massive crowds take to the streets of the Egyptian capital. Euphoria. After 5 lean years, there are signs that Egypt is about to stand on its own feet. They are cheering this man, echoing the applause which greeted a major policy speech to the Arab Socialist Union in late July. It was then that President Anwar Sadat dropped his diplomatic bomb. He announced that the Russians had been asked to withdraw their advisors from Egyptian soil after nearly a decade of Soviet-Egyptian cooperation. Sadat's decision, just a year after signing a 15-year Egyptian-Soviet friendship treaty, was both dramatic and unexpected. This week, ECHO examines the consequences for Egypt, a nation at the crossroads. The Soviet intrusion into Egypt began 10 years ago. To the Egyptians, Soviet support meant military and economic aid. To the Russians, Egypt was an invaluable Mediterranean base. Contact between the leaders of both countries was frequent. Soviet Defense Minister Marshal Andrei Grechko was a particularly welcome visitor. When he flew to Cairo in May, there was no hint of what was to come. Grechko had helped the Egyptians rebuild their army after the crushing defeat by Israel in the 1967 war. Egypt's air force, totally destroyed, was re-equipped with Russian jets. Russian military equipment enabled the Egyptians to maintain the uneasy no peace, no war posture which has dominated the Middle East for 5 years. And Soviet missiles, operated by Egyptians but maintained by Russians, symbolized the cooperation between the two nations. Nevertheless, as the number of Soviets rose to over 20,000, Egyptians grew concerned. By May 1971, when Soviet President Podgorny arrived in Cairo to sign a 15-year friendship treaty, disaffection spread. In fact, the treaty merely papered over the cracks threatening to split the two signatories. Both nations put on smiling faces, but Egyptian military leaders were already pressing President Sadat to deal more firmly with the Russians. The army particularly resented a Russian military presence which was too big and too arrogant. Egypt had become merely a land base for Russian maneuvers in the Mediterranean. Furthermore, as long as the Soviet Union held Egypt firmly in its embrace, the Egyptians were committed to a Soviet Middle East policy they could neither influence nor change. Until now, it was part of the price the Egyptians paid for Russian aid. Technicians from Stalingrad taught Egyptians modern industrial practice. In the universities, Egyptian students were lectured by academics from Moscow. Engineers from Leningrad supervised plant installation. It all began here at the Aswan Dam. When Western finance withdrew from the $1,000 million scheme to tame the Nile, the Soviet Union stepped in. The project first bore fruit last year, when the 12 turbines of the Aswan hydroelectric plant began to operate at a capacity of 10,000 million kilowatts. And for the first time, light and power were brought to the vast outback of Egypt. 96% of Egypt is desert, but to make the desert blossom is a cherished dream. That was what President Nasser's concept of the Aswan Dam was all about. Today, the dream is becoming reality as the Aswan electricity and irrigation projects slowly reclaim the dead earth of the desert. 1.5 million acres of desert have been made to grow grain, rice, cotton and grapes. Even the desert is proving productive. In cooperation with foreign oil companies, Egypt has at last found oil in quantity beneath the sand. For years, Egypt, the political leader of the Arab world, could only look with envy as lesser nations grew rich on oil. Today, Egypt produces 30 million tons annually. This, together with rich finds of natural gas, will make Egypt a major fuel exporter in the 1980s. The Helwan steel plant, 30 kilometers south of Cairo, was established with Russian money. Steel produced here is uneconomical, but if production reaches its target of 1.5 million tons a year by 1977, this plant may contribute to the rapid expansion of Egyptian industry. Egypt's economy has a desperate need for heavy industry. More than 10 years of Russian credit have created new industries, such as the shipyard in Alexandria. Egypt has made impressive progress, but the cost has been staggering. This country is $3,000 million in debt to Russia. Its trade deficit last year was $400 million. Thus, as it paid for the Russian military presence, it was slipping deeper into financial chaos. Average income, at $160 a year, had risen little. These and other problems still dog Egypt as it faces an uncertain future. For one thing, the Russians have not all gone. The Soviet fleet in the Mediterranean needs bases in Egypt and will not lightly yield them. Given the Russian determination to dominate this part of the world, Egypt is too important to abandon. If the Russians choose to remain, there is little Egypt can do. Russian bombers still operate from the Cairo West airfield. Red Army units remain firmly in charge of the missiles. It is estimated that 15,000 Russians are leaving, but thousands remain. What then is the future for this nation of 34 million people as it struggles to regain something of the power and the glory of its exotic past? Peace with Israel? Union with Libya? Time, as always, will tell.